Hello readers and writers, I'm MJ and today we're going to be doing my September wrap-up. So this is probably coming a little bit later in the month because I have already recorded this. And then I realized that I recorded it and didn't capture any audio for some reason. I had switched some setting on my camera and lost the 2 videos that I had filmed that day. So we're back at it again. So in September I read 9 books or 3,541 pages. So not too bad. It seems to be about pretty average for me lately. The books were pretty split on side. About 33% of them were smaller books or under 300 pages. 33% of them were medium-sized books or 300 to 499 pages. And 33% were bigger books, so 500 or more pages. 13% of the books was nonfiction, which I think is just 1 book, honestly, and 88% are fiction. My most popular genre is science fiction, followed by LGBTQIA and romance, ironically enough. Most of the books I read in September were print, 67% of them, 22% were digital, and 11% were audiobook, or just 1 of them actually. Alright, so what did I actually read? These books will be going in order of what I finished first as opposed to what I finished last. So the first book I picked up is The Borrow a Bookshop Holiday. This is a stunning book that I got from the Unplugged book box, and I really wanted to keep it on my shelves. I did go into it knowing it was a romance, but it was a book about books, and I tend to really enjoy those. So I was willing to kind of deal with the romance for it. It also was a book about a vacation, so I took it on vacation with me, hoping for like very vacation vibes. So I was in the mood for this book as much as possible for it being a romance, which is just not my thing. And it didn't go specifically well. There was no vacation vibes to it. It is a book about books, and they're there, sort of. More as a setting. Books did get dropped in it, but they were very European books. There was very, very little diversity to them at all. Like the most diverse book selection was Le Guin, Ursula K. Le Guin, who is at least a female science fiction writer. But most of them were more like European classics getting dropped. And the book itself was not very diverse at all. So that part was very disappointing. But then it's extremely romance, which again, I knew that going into it, and that part of it's fine, except that the plot didn't work at all. Like there's a lot of holes in it. The characters fell flat, specifically the male character. Like it makes no sense of why he was even in the situation. The romance makes no sense to me. Neither of them were in a place where they should probably be getting into a relationship. And I was concerned that I was being unfair to it because, again, I'm not a romance reader. So I did kind of post some of my concerns to Instagram to get some feedback. And I was pretty much said or told that, you know, yeah, romance books still need to be good books. And this one fell short on a lot of things like plot and characters. So for me, it was definitely disappointing, especially since I really wanted to keep it on my shelves because it's gorgeous, but I will not be. It will be going up for sale on Pango because maybe somebody else will love it, where I did not, but it was a miss for me. My next read was The Fall of Coley. This was my audiobook read for the month. This is the 3rd book in a post-apocalyptic science fiction story by M.R. Carey, who is now an auto-read author for me. I read their newest book that came out. I read the arc of it, and it's fantastic. So I will probably read anything they put out ever and highly recommend them. So this is the summing up of a trilogy, and so it's really hard to say what it's about. You definitely need the context of the first 2 books, but if you like post-apocalyptic science fiction of any sort, then you definitely need to pick this up. It does a lot with science and society, and race, and just characterization. There's one line in this book, fairly early in this third book, that let me know how the series was going to end. Just one line, and I knew what the conclusion was going to be, and I was right. But it worked. I don't think I'm sad the line was there, because it kind of just like, I don't think that the book wasn't, like, the book was so well written and everything had put up to this point that one line was enough for me to be like, oh, okay. So that, I think, credits the writing and the story building and like the world building of this and character building of this trilogy, that I was able to like then go, okay, I know where this is going, and it's where it needed to go, honestly. Like, I just think it really worked. I will be rereading this trilogy. I did all of them in audio, and I really like the audiobook. I really like the narrator, so I highly do recommend that. But at some point I will be going back, probably like annotating this a little bit more, definitely rereading it. I just really like their writing a lot. So, yeah, definitely a series to check out. The next book I read was an arc called The Djinn Bot of Shantyport. I think this is out now. I think it just released. It is a science fiction Aladdin retelling, and this was a miss for me. So one of the biggest things, well, there's a lot, but the writing style specifically, I couldn't figure out what was really bugging me about the writing style until so I actually stopped and was pulled myself out of the story and was paying attention to what the author was doing, and realized that a lot of the sentences didn't have verbs in them. So especially be verbs. So so-and-so went to the store, so-and-so the store would be what the sentence said, or something weird like that. And then in addition to that, there were just fragments. So ones that, sentences that didn't even have nouns and verbs in them, that were 2 sentences long, that were not self-contained. And I know some authors, get away with breaking rules. There's different writing styles. This did not work. It just broke all the rules, and for why? There wasn't a good reason for it. If anything, it was harmful to the reader because I wasn't connected. It was so distant of a writing style. And then the narrator made it even more distant. So the story is being told by a bot that's like a drone. And the drone is very distant from a lot of the events that are happening, and so they'll just info dump what is happening. So instead of telling what's happening, they'll just just spewed it all out in a sentence and then go on a monologue about something weird. And so it definitely felt very disconnected from what was going on. There was a lot of questions specifically about this drone that never got answered. I don't even know if they got started. And I know there's going to be the next, a part 2, but I will not be picking it up. Absolutely not. The characters, I think because of this, at least partially because they were so distant for this narration style, you just didn't really get connected to them. But they were supposed to be adults, and they read like middle graders. So it was really hard to remember that these 2 characters, so they're siblings. One is a human girl or woman, and the other is a bot monkey. And they're both supposed to be adult age. And they both act like they're in junior high or middle school. And so it's very hard to remember that they're actually adults. And then they live with their mother, who is horrendous. The depiction of their mother, she's just a horrible person. And yet she's supposed to be this major rebel. And I despise her. And there would be brief moments where, as a reader, you were supposed to like her. She was supposed to come back because, the characters like these moments made the characters all okay, all worth it, and they were just horrible, and it'd be like, this is toxic. And so I did not like the parent perception at all. I didn't like any of the characters. There was just this plot line of mech fighting that I didn't get why it needed to be there. And then there's just weird scenes with relationships. There is queer rep, but it's kind of gross how it's in here, so it's definitely not like positive. I mean, it's not negative, but it's still not positive. Yeah, I really did not like this book. So yeah. I think this book could be for somebody else. Definitely not for me. Not at all. But I do think there's people that would like it. Like, if you like mech battles, then you'll like that part. If you like very alpha male kind of science fiction, you might really enjoy this. If you care more about action than plot and characters, then you might enjoy this. I do think that somebody could find this book to be very, very enjoyable. But I am not that person. Then my next book was my nonfiction read called Gender Magic, and this is a book about transitioning, being trans and non-binary from a clinical psychology perspective. So I saw this in the store, picked it up on chance, and was very, very excited about it. The book is separated into 3 parts. The first part pretty much talks about like transitioning, clinical applications. It talks about, you know, psychology trials and how those kind of relate to questioning your gender and, you know, not needing to rush who you are, but feeling ready and equipped to take the steps that you need to take that are appropriate for you. I thought it was very well presented, and I was really excited to recommend this book to everyone. Then I read the second section of it, and the second section is about, actually let me see exactly what it's about. So the first section is entitled Play, the second section is entitled Pleasure, and the third section is entitled Possibility. And pleasure is equating to intimacy, physical intimacy. That's all it is. And it made a very solid point, not solid as incorrect, but solid as in it was not moving from the fact that in order to have acceptance of your trans identity, you need to be comfortable with yourself in terms of eroticism. And I have a problem with that as an aromantic asexual individual. So the second section started with a fairly graphic expression of sex positivity. And I'm all for positive representation, positivity. I just firmly believe that that includes individuals' right to choose to not have sex, or to not choose or to respect the fact that some individuals do not want to be involved in intimate situations. That it is extremely valid to be asexual, and that is okay, and you can still love who you are without having to display it physically. And you can still love another individual without having to display it physically. And this book does not accept that. So the second section starts with a very graphic situation without any warning whatsoever, and I was like, oh, well, I don't really want to read that. And so I read it, but I didn't really want to read it. And it wasn't until the second chapter of the second section that aromantics and asexual was even brought up, and it was just in this like subsection of an afterthought that basically says, oh, well, if you're aro ace, then this still really applies to you because eroticism applies to everything. And I was, yeah, so yeah, I took horrible offense to that, just the way it was said. Like, it could have been done so much better. At the beginning of the second section, it could have said, hey, look, this is a very, next section is going to be very focused on intimacy. I understand not everyone experiences or needs to experience intimacy, and specifically if you are aromantic and asexual, this section may not apply to you because it doesn't apply to everyone. Okay. And then it could go on to say something like, but you know, it's a spectrum. Aromanticism and asexuality is a spectrum. So there may be something that you still will get out of this chapters. You know, feel free to skip it or move on. It does not say that. This book is going on about intersectionality, and then basically says, well, if you're aro ace, this still applies to you. I'm still right. What I'm saying is still like how it should be. And then goes on and is extremely erotic positive. And I didn't enjoy it at all. And I was also offended. And then, as I'm reading, the third section goes into building your support group, and you're that. And again, it could have been really good, and there was some good parts of it, but basically it is written as if you are an extroverted neurotypical. It was not ableist friendly at all. Both neurodivergent friendly or like disabled friendly. Like, there's people with autoimmune disorders that can't go and socialize the same way. People who have mobility issues that may not find acceptance or be as easy to just get out and navigate. There's people like myself who have absolutely no social skills and don't know how to interact with people. All of these are very, very valid, and we can find our people with that. And that's okay, but those were not being written into it. It was all the way this narrator, it was the narrator's way, the writer's way. And it made me realize that there's probably even less intersectionality in the book in terms of like race and such. The author is white and non-binary. I am white and non-binary, so definitely we both came from dysfunctional families, a very similar background, and so I related to that a lot. But then it made me realize the more, like, anytime we diverged, the author was very focused in on what they were saying. So it made me realize that even the part that I related to, other people probably aren't. I think it would be a pretty surefire bet that this is not for people who are not white. And obviously, like, I can't really speak to that because I don't have that background, but it's just not a very diverse book. And so what could have been a really, really wonderful book, and what I was really excited about, ended up being a massive miss for me. So I'm kind of sad by that. So I'm very sad by that. So the next book I read is a indie book called The Bell Tolling by Amina Jamali. And I'm sorry if I said your name wrong. I've only ever really seen it written. And this is an indie book that is a religious fantasy. So it follows this group of individuals that are apostles to a chosen one who has come back to be a representative of a god and to save the people. And this is a very interesting book because it has two very different aspects to it, and which I think is very seen a lot in religion in general. It was this one aspect of these people trying to be good and trying to trying to live up to their god to be the best, like, apostles that they can be, but then at the same time they're like in a war, and so they're very bloody and very gruesome and practice battle scenes and such. So there's a very juxtaposition to this novel. If you like religious fiction, I think you will absolutely love this book. Next, I read Some Desperate Glory. This is a Woman Crate science fiction that is supposed to be queer sci-fi, and it is queer-friendly sci-fi. I'm not sure if the author is queer or not. I do know that according to the blurb, I believe they're cis and in a different gender relationship, but that doesn't mean they're not queer. But this book deals a lot with being queer, both like the main character is queer and is in a setting that is pretty much cult-like, that doesn't allow any differences. It's a very military regime and expects them to act a certain way, and she knows that she finds out fairly early that her brother is gay and has a relationship with someone else, and she thinks that kind of like spurs on him leaving home and her having to make some life-changing decisions. And I'm not sure I really like the way that the queer representation was done in this book. It seemed a little bit too much for me, a little too, like, I don't know if it necessarily needed to be quite as homophobic as it was, but at the same time, like, I know when I'm writing, I do put in actual experience I've had and put them in and use that to illustrate a point. And I think that's what this author was definitely trying to do, and I think that's very valid. I don't know, just something about the way it was done didn't jive with me. I'm not saying it's bad or it's wrong. I'm just saying it didn't quite jive with me. Like, I don't know. It just felt weird. In and of itself, it is, I believe, YA, maybe like new adult-ish science fiction. It does have some parallel worlds in it, and deals with, it's set in a time after the Earth has been destroyed by aliens, and just kind of humans finding their place and having to come to a sense of truth. The part I really did enjoy and really relate to is that this character grew up in a society that was told certain things were correct, and they had to kind of unlearn that to figure out their own truth. And they're not a very likable character at the beginning at all, and there's a lot of growth in this novel, and I think it seems like it's very realistic growth. And having had a background where I grew up in an environment that was also very rigid and cult-like, I've related a lot to the unlearning and trying to grow as a person, and I thought that was really represented well and really well done. Also, the book is just stunning. So, I really enjoyed that. So, this was probably not like massively loved, but it definitely wasn't a miss either. So, I enjoyed it. Okay, so next I have kind of a little fun book called The Plants vs. Zombies graphic novel. We ended up picking this up when I did a birthday book haul where me and the kid went to a whole bunch of different bookstores, and we saw this and we just thought it'd be fun because, you know, reminiscence of the Plants vs. Zombie video games. This actually is the 5th book, so you were kind of thrown right in the middle of a storyline that I didn't entirely understand. but there wasn't much to it, so I was able to catch up pretty fast. It is set in Halloween, so it was a great time to read it. There's 2 humans in here that I had never heard of before, so that was very interesting. I think I liked the art, but the writing, not as much. I don't know if we'll collect the whole series or not. It depends on what my kid thinks about them. I could go either way. It was just still fun to pick it up. Then I read Alone with You in the Ether by Olivia Blake. And it says right here on the cover that this is a love story. Listen to that. There you go. This is the book. It is a love story. I, for some reason, was convinced that this was speculative fiction. Possibly because the description sounds really like speculative fiction, like time travel should be somewhere in here, and also because the only other thing I've read by Olivia Blake is Atlas 6, and that is speculative fiction, so I expected something similar along that lines. This is not. This is romance. A weird romance. I enjoyed the first half of the book where there was just a friendship between the 2 individuals. I did not enjoy the last half of the book where they start getting a relationship where the main character who has bipolar disorder starts going off her meds. I am very concerned about the representation, but I'm not really going to go into that because I am not bipolar. I only have raised a human who is, and so I have personal thoughts, but they are not own voice thoughts. So do not, I would recommend that you not read this for the mental health rep specifically, and know that anytime anyone has a mood disorder that they need to be involved with a team that is looking out for their best interests and whatever that involves for them, because it will differ by individuals. So just because Olivia Blake is able to go off her meds does not mean that is the best decision for everyone with bipolar disorder. And I think that if the main character is a healthy representation, that is something that could be discussed. So that's what I'm going to say with that. I'm not keeping that one as well, so that's kind of sad. I do have one more Olivia Blake book, so that is the sequel to Atlas 6. I will read that. I don't know if I'll be picking up any more of her works or not, honestly. I don't know. We'll see. And then the last book I finished is Crooked Kingdom. This is a reread for me. I had started rereading the entire series. Well, actually, I'd only read Six Crows and then Crooked Kingdom. And so I went back and read the original trilogy, which I'm really glad that I did, because rereading Six of Crows and specifically Crooked Kingdom, it made so much more sense now. I'm so glad I did that. I do think Six of Crows and the Crooked Kingdom are a lot better than the original trilogy, but I liked the original trilogy, so I'm glad I did that. And like just the subtext of this novel and like the political situation just made so much more sense having that background knowledge. So very happy that I did that and then to reread this, and now I have the other books in the series that I have not read, and I'm going to move on to them eventually. And then one book I DNF'd is Beyond That, the Sea. This was given to me as an ARC by the publisher, which I'm really appreciative of, but this book is just not for me. I actually started reading it on audiobook while I was on vacation and DNF'd it. Then, so the general premise is that this person got sent to America to live with his family during the war because it was going to be safer for her, and I only got as far as, like, not very far into the book, honestly. It was talking about how this, like, foster mother didn't know what to do with her because she'd only had 2 boys, and that she, you know, the whole reason they agreed to it because it was a girl and there's so much difference between girls and boys, and oh no, like two entirely different species, and I just couldn't deal with it. And I DNF'd it. So know that going into it. I know not everyone's going to have issues with that like I do, but I did. So it was definitely not for me. And there you go. That is my September reading. Is there anything that you saw that you want to read or that you have read? Do you have any different opinions than I did on the books? Because everyone is entitled to their own opinion. Yeah, and let me know what you read in September. And as always, keep reading, keep writing, and until next time.